Since we can remember, one thing has always been a thorn in the side of peace: war. Many wars have been fought throughout the ages, some for honor and glory, some for religion, and then we have our senseless wars, those over greed and power or pure hatred. Since the Civil War, war for America has been ugly. The hundreds of thousands of lives lost during the Civil War for one side's belief that they have the right to own a human being, to be their master and treat them as they desire. Human lives born and sold into slavery, and were given no choice but a life of servitude. There were those that thankfully thought of these precious lives as more than just a thing to control. Abraham Lincoln set the stage for the North, and was a founding member of the Republican Party, the party that fought against slavery and eventually won the abolishment of slavery under the foundation that all men and women are created equal. A battle we all wish we'd have never been, but the devil always has a plan to keep the people divided. Then we get to the World Wars. World War II. Hitler's Reich has pushed its way into France and has almost completely washed the Jewish people off the face of the earth. His view of the Jewish people can only be described as pure hatred, a man hell-bent to make the world bend the knee to him and his new German way of life. But how did Adolf Hitler come into power in a democratic country? At the end of World War I, with the successful Allied advance in 1918, Germany realized the war was unwinnable and signed an armistice. As its imperial government collapsed, civil unrest and worker strikes spread across the nation. Fearing a communist revolution, major parties joined to suppress the uprisings, establishing the parliamentary Weimar Republic. One of the new government's first tasks was implementing the peace treaty imposed by the Allies. In addition to losing over a tenth of its territory and dismantling its army, Germany had to accept full responsibility for the war and pay reparations, debilitating its already weakened economy. All this was seen as a humiliation by many nationalists and veterans. They wrongly believed the war could have been won if the army hadn't been betrayed by politicians and protesters. For Hitler, these views became obsession, and his bigotry and paranoid delusions led him to pin the blame on Jews. His words found resonance in a society with many anti-Semitic people. By this time, hundreds of thousands of Jews had integrated into German society, but many Germans continued to perceive them as outsiders. After World War I, Jewish success led to ungrounded accusations of subversion and war profiteering. It cannot be stressed enough that these conspiracy theories were born out of fear, anger, and bigotry, not fact. Nonetheless, Hitler found success with them. When he joined a small nationalist political party, his manipulative public speaking launched him into its leadership and drew increasingly larger crowds. Combining anti-Semitic ideals with populist resentment, the Nazis denounced both communism and capitalism as international Jewish conspiracies to destroy Germany. The Nazi Party was not initially popular. After they made an unsuccessful attempt at overthrowing the government, the party was banned, and Hitler was jailed for treason. But upon his release about a year later, he immediately began to rebuild the movement, and then, in 1929, the Great Depression happened. It led to American banks withdrawing their loans from Germany, and the already struggling German economy collapsed overnight. Hitler took advantage of the people's anger, offering them convenient scapegoats and a promise to restore Germany's former greatness. Mainstream parties proved unable to handle the crisis, while left-wing opposition was too fragmented by internal conflicts. And so, some of the frustrated public flocked to the Nazis, increasing their parliamentary votes from under 3% to over 18% in just 2 years. In 1932, Hitler ran for president but lost the election to decorated war hero General von Hindenburg. But with 36% of the vote, Hitler had demonstrated the extent of his support. The following year, advisors and business leaders convinced Hindenburg to appoint Hitler as chancellor, hoping to channel his popularity for their own goals. Though the chancellor was only the administrative head of parliament, Hitler steadily expanded the power of his position. While his supporters formed paramilitary groups and fought protesters in streets, Hitler raised fear of communist uprising and argued that only he could restore law and order. Then, in 1933, a young worker was convicted of setting fire to the Parliament building. Hitler used the event to convince the government to grant him emergency powers. Within a matter of months, freedom of the press was abolished, other parties were disbanded, and anti-Jewish laws were passed. Many of Hitler's early radical supporters were arrested and executed, along with potential rivals, and when President Hindenburg died in August 1934, it was clear there would be no new election. Disturbingly, many of Hitler's early measures didn't require mass repression. His speeches exploited the fear and ire of the people to support behind himself and his Nazi party. Meanwhile, businessmen and intellectuals wanting to be on the right side of public opinion endorsed Hitler. They assured themselves and each other that his more extreme rhetoric was only for show. Decades later, Hitler's rise remains a warning of how fragile democratic institutions can be in the face of angry crowds and a leader willing to feed their anger and exploit their fears. America, the sleeping giant as Japan called us, was enjoying a time of peace after World War I and was content on staying out of worldly affairs. While Hitler continued his march upon Eastern Europe, Japan, amidst a declaration of peace with the United States, had set a plan in motion to let America and its people no longer enjoy its state of peace. On Sunday morning, December 7, 1941, the Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service attacked the neutral United States at Naval Station Pearl Harbor near Honolulu, Hawaii, killing 2,400 Americans and injuring 1,100 others. The attack sank 4 U.S. Navy battleships and damaged 4 others. It also damaged 3 cruisers, 3 destroyers, and 1 mine layer. Canada declared war on Japan within hours of the attack on Pearl Harbor, the first Western nation to do so. On December 8th, the United States declared war on Japan and entered World War II on the side of the Allies. In a speech to Congress, President Franklin D. Roosevelt called the bombing of Pearl Harbor a date which will live in infamy. Amidst the civil rights movements of the 1960s, with influential leaders like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr., to name a few, another senseless war was happening in Vietnam, a war that America had no business going into. Vietnam was going through regime changes, and America was set on interfering with their eternal squabbles. Thousands of young men of every race were drafted during the Vietnam War. The lives that we lost during that war were staggering. A total of 58,220 American lives were lost during this war. A war that some say President John F. Kennedy would have handled differently, most likely a less violent approach. Sadly, one of the most influential presidents for peace was struck down during his presidency in Dallas, Texas, November 22, 1963. As we enter into a new administration, so it seems that we will be entering a new war, a war with China. The United States has predicted that if we go to an all-out war with China, we will lose. A question our children would want to ask us would be, why? Is the answer to our problems more death? Why do the powerful few dictate the future for all the powerless? Money is the root of all evil. We have heard this saying time and time again. Still, we can only assume that a grab for money and power is at the source of this coming war with China. The tipping point that will come in this coming war will be the country of Taiwan. Long has China had its gaze fixated on the small country of Taiwan, a true definition for a working democracy with valuable trades and a booming economy. Taiwan is also responsible for more than 60% of the world's microprocessors, and China wants to make it theirs to control. China's President Xi Jinping has claimed that anyone that insults China will be smashed against the Great Wall of Steel. Australia and Great Britain have struck a deal with the United States military to supply them with nuclear subs, to have a quick way of striking back at China if they were to make a move. This has made China very angry, which is why China has started to position its naval forces at the very edge of neutral waters close to Alaska. We don't know how many more senseless wars we will have to endure, but hopefully we can learn to live in peace with one another. An all-out nuclear war isn't what the world needs, but we definitely need to get a grip on our own country's internal problems. America has never been seen as a weak country until recent. With the sloppy withdrawal of American forces from Afghanistan, which devastated the Afghan government, resulting in a complete collapse of everything brave Americans helped fight for over 20 years. It has damaged the reputation of the American armed forces and has made the United States look weak and unreliable to its allies, not to mention simultaneously bolstering the Taliban's military might by leaving billions of dollars of American equipment including tanks, Black Hawk helicopters, and night vision goggles, something that gave American forces an advantage when it came to nighttime warfare. That advantage is now gone. We will leave you with some inspiring words from President John F. Kennedy, words that we hope our current administration can take some lessons from to promote peace and promote forward progress for the American people. God bless America.
We shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe to assure the survival and the success of liberty. Every thoughtful citizen who despairs of war and wishes to bring peace should begin by looking inward, by examining his own attitude towards the possibilities of peace. Too many of us think it is impossible. Too many think it is unreal. But that is a dangerous, defeatist belief. It leads to the conclusion that war is inevitable, that mankind is doomed, that we are gripped by forces we cannot control. We need not accept that view. Our problems are man-made, therefore they can be solved by man, and man can be as big as he wants. No problem of human destiny is beyond human beings. Man's reason and spirit have often solved the seemingly unsolvable, and we believe they can do it again. Surely the opening vistas of space promise high costs and hardships, as well as high reward. So it is not surprising that some would have us stay where we are a little longer, to rest, to wait. But this city of Houston, this state of Texas, this country of the United States was not built by those who waited and rested and wished to look behind them. This country was conquered by those who move forward, and so will space. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
In Dallas, Texas, 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade in downtown Dallas. The first reports say that President Kennedy has been seriously wounded by this shooting. The flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
There's only one word to describe the picture here, and that's grief.
What was it that moved this nation so much?
Its youth, grace, beauty, hope, promise. As history goes on, it will stay a very prominent part of its history. It's never going to fade. It is never going to fade.